right, MREA Mastermind Book Club. We are just getting going. I'm hopping on just a couple minutes early because transparently this is the very first time I have engaged in Facebook Live. So I'm going to hop on, wait for a couple comments just to make sure that people can see me and check it out. In fact, I am going to text a friend as we start here just to make sure. If you are on and live, send me a message and then we'll get going once I know that we've been joined. All right. I'm going to jump in after I send out a text. We are planning on starting right at noon. And I'll start with or without people. So we will see. Just making sure that technology is working and we're good to go. Many of you, I might just jump in and start by just saying many of you I know, I've met, have been to any of my many Model Your Way to $1 Million sessions that I've done at Family Reunion, Mega Camp. I've done them actually around the country now as well. Awesome. Getting some feedback that it's working. Good to know. And so most of you know me from, actually, most of you know me not socially, but actually just through the Red Book, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book. So when Ben actually started putting this together and asked me to participate, I said I'm all in. And there wasn't any better week for me to really sort of jump in and share than this session when we're going to be going through pages 128 and 172. Now, we're going to move fast. I'm going to try to answer questions as we go as well. And so feel free to ask questions as we go, but believe me, we're going to blitz through 4 models in about an hour or less. So 10, 15 minutes per model. If you have your books in front of you, that will help for sure. And if you don't, that's okay. I'm gonna share some things along the way, and hopefully at the end of the day, we're gonna look at these models quite a bit differently than when we first started, right? Maybe even before this call. What I'll tell you is this. Gary says that MREA in real estate is both a science and an art. A science and an art. And what does that mean? You know, I think of art, and I will tell you that the art on my walls, actually, there isn't any art on this wall, but the art on the walls in my house is probably a lot different than the art on the walls in your house, or right, Kevin's house, or Sarah's house, or Tracy's house, who's on right now. What I'll say is that's because that's completely subjective, right? What's artistic to me, or what I like, is going to be something completely different than what Sarah likes, or Kevin likes, or Ben likes, or anyone else on the call likes. In most cases, that's art. There is some art to becoming a millionaire real estate agent. What Gary says is the art is the inspiration and motivation. The inspiration and motivation that each of us have. And no one can do that for you but you, right? No one can do that for you but you. This week I posted a video for my organization, Experience Real Estate, and it was on motivation, right? Motivation, where does it come from? It comes from ambition and expectancy. Ambition and expectancy. That's all internal. But Gary also said there's a science to this business. There's a science to this business, and that is the models, right? That is, what are the 4 main models that top agents use? So what are they? Right? If you know them, you can post them online here. But the first one is the economic model, right? The second one, the lead generation model. The third one, the budget model, which by the way is my favorite. And the fourth one is your organizational model. So economic model, lead generation model, budget model, organizational model. Today we're going to talk about how each of them interact, how each of them play within themselves, and how we have to have the first to get to the second. We have to have the second to get to the third, and we have to have the third to get to the fourth. But remember, it's a science and an art. The art of the business is inspiration and motivation. That's you. The science of the business, right? So that's the art. The science of the business is the models. And so all of us probably graduated high school. I'm assuming. Maybe you didn't, maybe you did, but most of us have. And in high school, right, it was probably, gosh, it could have been biology, where we learned the scientific method. And what are the main parts of the scientific method? First one, what's the first part? Anyone remember? No one's a science major. We're all in real estate. The first part is the question, right? The scientific method starts with a question. We have this question, right? What is this? Or how do we do that? Is this reality? Is this a fact? Is this right? It starts with a question or a theory. That's right, Sarah, ask a question. The second part is hypothesis, right? It's what we believe. I think the answer is this. So we start with a theory or a question, we go to a hypothesis. The third one is experiment. We experiment. The fourth step is we analyze our experiment, like what happened, what were the results, and the fifth is we come to a conclusion. Now, here's what I guarantee. The majority of us have questions about our business every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year. We have hypotheses. We have these hypotheses that we believe, if I do this in my business, this will probably happen. So what do we go and do? We experiment. Hey, I wonder if I send out this postcard. I wonder if I make this phone call. I wonder if I put up this billboard. I wonder if we have all these experiments. And the problem with our industry is that that's what we do. We question, we hypothesize, we experiment. We question, we hypothesize, we experiment. And we could build an entire career, years and years and years of just doing that. Circular, circular, circular. What Gary Keller said is, hey, enter MREA. I'm going to go out, I being, right, Gary said, I'm going to go out, I'm going to interview people, right, agents all over the country, top agents that had questions, that hypothesized, that experimented so that I don't have to experiment anymore. In fact, Gary analyzed all the results, formed a conclusion, and put it in the book. And if we look at it that way, then we won't feel like we have to test things. In fact, right, if we find ourselves using expressions like, I'm going to reinvent myself this year, or gosh, I just need to blow up my business and start over, guess what? It means we're not building our business, or we don't have models, right? We're not following a model. Because if we were following a model, there would be no experimenting. There wouldn't be any reinvention. We have a model, we follow it. So on page 129, our economic model starts. That is the first model. So by definition, what is our economic model? Gary calls it our equation for success. Now, members of my organization know I love equations, right? And here's why. I'm not a math major. I'm not phenomenal with equations, but I know one thing and one thing for certain. If I have an equation and X equals Y, that means there's no question, right? This will equal that. Gary says your economic model will be your equation for success. It is the relationship between a series of activities and an expected outcome. If you turn in your books to page 131, what you'll see is there's your economic model, right? You can print it out, you can spreadsheet it out. In fact, we have spreadsheets. Our company has spreadsheets. You can find them easily online. If you don't have it and you want it, just leave an email in this thread, and I will make sure that that we get that spreadsheet over to you. But what this economic model is an equation for success. An equation for success. Kevin, I can't figure out that equation. So what I will say is the beauty of MREA is this equation is simple. It's simple. I know that if I do X, I will get Y. I'm not going to even throw another letter in between. Why? Because Gary figured it out for us. So this is what our economic model will answer. Our economic model will answer this question. It'll show where your money comes from, right? Your gross revenue. It'll show where your money goes, your expense, and it'll show how much you have left over, your net income. gross revenue, expense, net income. Ultimately, it is a business planning tool, much like your budget is. However, this is going to answer one question only: what activities do I need? In fact, there are 3 things that are going to show up in your economic model. There are 3 things. Number 1, we're going to focus on the numbers we must hit. We're going to focus on the numbers we must hit. Jenny did a phenomenal job last week in going through the 8 goal categories of the MREA. See, if we understand those goal categories and we set those goal categories up, we will then use those goal categories to build our economic model. In fact, as you looked through your economic model, right, there are going to be some things in there that you may not know. Like maybe you don't know your conversion ratio from seller, right, listing appointment to listings taken. Maybe you don't know your conversion ratio from buyer broker agreement signed to offer written or buyer sold. Most of us don't before we plug into these models. Most of us don't until we have the 8 goal categories clearly not lined up for our business, such that the economic model can work, such that we can use the information from those goal categories to plug into this economic model. So we're going to focus on the numbers we must hit. The second thing we're going to do, right, the second thing is focus on appointments. Focus on appointments and then focus on conversion ratios. Focus on conversion ratios. So I'm just going to go through some numbers briefly for you, right? Go through what an economic model might look like for you or for me or for really anybody. And here's what we know. Let's get some assumptions. Let's assume that the average sales price, and maybe you want to post your average sales price, but I'm going to assume our average sales price is roughly about $300,000, right? Roughly $300,000. And I'm going to assume that your commission rate, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, your commission rate is 3%. So, right, average sales price $300,000, commission rate 3%. Now, let's talk about some conversion ratios. So if you're on page 131, you want to take some notes, I'm going to give you what the conversion ratios were of agents across the country as Gary interviewed, right? These conversion ratios probably are not going to change as MREA 2 comes out, right? As we're involved in research for MREA 2, and I'm privileged to be in those conversations, conversion ratios probably aren't going to change dramatically. But what Gary found is about 80% of the time, if an agent went out on a listing appointment, they came back with the listing signed. 80% of the time, 8 out of 10. If they're a solid agent, 8 out of 10. After they took that listing, about 65% of the time, they sold it, right? And you might be thinking, oh gosh, Chris, not me. Not me. Like I sold like 90% of the listings I take. Well, congratulations. The top agents across the country did not. That may be a product of the market that you're in as well, right? We're coming out of a market where 100% of the listings sold, right? But we're going into the market where that's not necessarily the case. So what I would say is, as you build out your economic model, as you build out the numbers you must hit, understand that top agents, 80% of the time, they went on an appointment, they took a listing. 65% of the time, they took a listing and it sold. So if our goal is to net $1 million, right? If the goal is to net $1 million, and we use those conversion ratios, here's what jumps out at me. We have to go on about 254 listing appointments a year. That seems overwhelming. We're like, I'm out, right? 254 listing appointments. It's 21 listing appointments a month. We need to take 203 listings, which means we have to sign 16 let's just call it 17. We have to sign 17 listings a month. Here's the deal, guys, right? That tells you to be on track. If your average sales price is $300, to be on track for $1 million business, you're signing 17 listings a month, 17 listings a month. Don't get stressed out on what happens afterwards. We're going to talk through that. The rest of your models will talk through that. But what the economic model tells me is this. If I'm going to be an MREA, if I'm going to be a millionaire real estate agent, I need to go on 254 listing appointments a year. I need to go on 21 listing appointments a month. That's the only thing I care about. 21 listing appointments a month. I need to sign 17 of them. So I need to be good. Yes? And my conversion ratios will follow through. My expenses will be there. We'll talk about that in the budget model. My cost of sale will be there. But at the end of the day, if my listing division over here, if my listing division goes on 21 listing appointments and takes 17 of them, I'm going to be just fine. Now flip over to the buy side. Flip over to the buy side. Well, we need to sell 132 homes to buyers in order to be on track to net $1 million. To net $1 million. What does that mean? The average agent went to a buyer consult, and 65% of the time the buyer signed a buyer broker agreement. Yes, buyer broker agreement, buyer loyalty agreement, they're signing something just like a seller does. 65% of the time. Now you might be thinking, oh, no, not me. Buyers work with me. I meet with them. They love to work with me. And I would say they probably will. In fact, you might be 80%, 90% of the time if you don't push to get that buyer broker agreement signed. The reality is as Gary went out into the marketplace and we think about that, only 65% of the buyers that you ask to sign that loyalty agreement will. We have to get good with that, because here's what's interesting. 80% of the buyers that sign that loyalty agreement eventually bought. Those are the national statistics. 80% of buyers that sign that agreement bought with you. Here's what's interesting. When do they go in your car? Right? You meet a buyer. They say, yeah, let's go out. Let's look. You don't ask them to sign the buyer broker agreement. Here's what's interesting about those conversion ratios. They flip. They're inversed. So what we found was for agents that are not using the buyer broker agreement, 80% of the time you talk to a buyer, they want to work with you, but only 65% of those buy. It doesn't take a math major to figure out very quickly that when using the buyer broker agreement, and this is why I love the economic model, using the buyer broker agreement, the economic model tells me that if I don't use the loyalty agreement, I'll have 43 more people in my car to sell the same number of homes. Why? Because a lot of people are going to say, no, Chris, I'm not going to sign that loyalty agreement. And I say, okay, great, right? I can only service people that are committed to me, and I'm committed to them. So that's okay. There are plenty of agents that will work without one. But 80% of the buyers that sign one will buy. 65% of the buyers that don't will. So if you don't use the buyer broker agreement, the economic model shows me or tells me that I have to put 43 more people in my car. Where's your time spent with buyers? Is it at the consult? No, that's 40 minutes, an hour. Is it signing paperwork, right? No, not really. It's in the car. It's in the car. I average that we typically spend about 10 hours with a buyer, right? 10 hours from a couple, right? Sitting, showing them the first group of homes, maybe the second group of homes, depending on how many homes there are to see. The reality is you may be spending 430 hours a year more by making the business decision of not using buyer broker agreements. And that's where the economic model all of a sudden shows up, and it's a business planning tool as well. Really, I look at the economic model and say, hey, you can build whatever model you want to hit. We will move towards targets, right? We will move towards targets. I am going to move towards a 65% conversion ratio from buyer consult to buyer broker agreement signed. Now, interestingly enough, if I'm at 80% or 90%, I know my team, or I know I am not getting those loyalty agreements signed, because 80% won't sign them. 65% will. But I'll save time. I'll save my own time, or I'll save my team's time by training them on that loyalty agreement. Even more important, think about your listing commission. And in fact, what I'll do as well, I have basically a list of economic models. And here's why. Because I believe economic models are just that. They're business planning tools, right? So I shared, if your average commission is 3%, I need to go on 21 listing appointments a month. I need to take 17 listings, right? To sell 132 roughly a year. Well, what happens if I reduce my commission? What happens if I reduce my commission, which so many people are doing? What happens if I just go from 3% to 2.5%? We do that in our sleep sometimes, right? 2.5%, sure, I'll do it. Well, all of a sudden, I need to go on 25 listing appointments a month. I need to take 20 listings a month, right? So that's 4 more listing appointments, 3 more listings taken. Over the course of the year, that's 50 more listing appointments I need to go on for the same income. For the same income. So let's be devil's advocate. Let's say on average my listing commission was 2.5 instead of 3. 50 more appointments. How long does it take to do a listing appointment? Figure an hour of preparation for it. Figure 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back, depending on where you live. Some markets are much longer. So that's an hour of travel, an hour of presentation, and let's just say an hour of post. Follow up, getting them some pricing. So let's just say it's 4 hours. 50 more appointments a year at 4 hours per appointment. Like, I'm no math major, but that's 200 hours a year. Guys, if we were working 40-hour work weeks, that's 5 weeks. I'm working 5 extra weeks by changing my listing commission. We have to use this economic model and build a business plan around that economic model. See, I looked at that, and when I truly engaged, when I truly bought into the model, when I truly started executing that model, I realized that that business decision changed my personal life. In fact, I made a concerted effort. I'm a 3% agent. I'm a 3% listing agent. I have to average 3% because I was unwilling to work an extra 5 weeks for something, actually for the same thing, for the same net $1 million. So economic model is going to do what? It's going to tell us ultimately what our business plan is, right? What our activity plan is. But at the end of the day, look at page 131. At the end of the day, all of our numbers, all of our conversions, all of our activities lead to one thing and one thing only. I care about one thing and one thing only. Philip on the post just said, hey, appointments, appointments, appointments. He's right. We care about one thing and one thing only. It's listing appointments and buyer consultations. Listing appointments and buyer appointments. Listing appointments and buyer appointments. In fact, your entire business, right? The economic model should tell us right now how many appointments we need for both sides of our business. How do we get appointments? How do we get appointments? If my economic model tells me exactly how many appointments I need, then what's my question? What question am I left with at the end of my listing or at the end of my economic model? How many leads, right? Right, guys? How many leads? How many leads do I need to bring in order to set those appointments? Because if this is an appointment game, which it is, if it's an appointment game, how many leads do I need? And that's the only question that you're left with at the end of your economic model. You're not left with, right? You're not stressing out about, well, man, skill and that's built in. You're not stressed out about where do I spend money. That's built in. Your expenses, your cost of sale, your conversion ratio. Hey, you're going to do awesome on some appointments and terrible on some others. That's all built in. We know that. The only thing that we're looking at after we've committed to an economic model is the number of appointments. And there's only one way to get appointments, and it's through leads. It's through leads. Enter the second model. Turn to page 133. Page 133 of MREA, the lead generation model. Now, I'm going to start by actually talking about a book. And if you haven't read this book, download it, buy it, read it. In fact, it was probably maybe 2 family reunions ago. Gary Keller got on stage and said, hey, I've done you a disservice. I have to apologize. I haven't pushed our agents enough to read the book, Positioning, The Battle for Your Mind. Yet, he quoted from it on page 133 of MREA. Positioning, The Battle for Your Mind. Al Reese and Jet Trout wrote that. They also wrote another book, and that's also quoted in MREA, and you should read that one too, The 22 Irrefutable Laws of Marketing. And here's why. Because in that book, Al Reese and Jack Trout said that under the constant bombardment of advertising, the human mind becomes saturated by brands. Right? Under the constant bombardment of advertising, the human mind becomes saturated by brands. So what happens when that happens? We only have room in our head for about 1 or 2, maybe 3 brands in any category type. How do I know this? I say sneaker or athletic shoe. What comes to your mind? What brands? Post on Facebook or just put it in the comments. What brand comes to your mind? What's the first brand that comes to your mind when I say sneaker? I live in Portland, so you can imagine what comes to my mind. Nike. Yep, Tracy, Nike. That's the first one probably that comes to most. What else comes to mind? Adidas, maybe, right? Right? Competitor. Nike, Adidas. What's after Adidas? New Balance, maybe. Runners, right? If you're a runner, you'll know New Balance, maybe. Puma, yeah, Adidas. Like, that's it, guys. I say sneaker. Sarah says Reebok. Are they still around? I say sneaker, and right, I say sneaker, and we think Nike, Adidas, that's it. We have 2 or 3 brands, right? We have 2 or 3 brands in any one category. What does that prove to you? It's no different for you. It's no different for us. Under the constant bombardment of advertising and marketing, how many people or how many real estate agents do you think a seller or a buyer think about or know? Maybe 2 agents, maybe 3 agents. So our lead generation model has to be layered with this understanding, right? In the 22 Irrefutable Laws of Marketing, same authors say this: the best approach to take in an over-communicated society is the oversimplified message. The NAR profile report of a buyer and seller, 2016, NAR profile report. If you don't read it, read it. It is our research for our industry. 88% of sellers interviewed 1, maybe 2 agents. 88% of buyers interviewed 1, maybe two agents. Why? Because that's all they have the mind share for. That's all they have the mind share for. So in lead generation, right, as we look at our lead generation model, and we think, okay, we need to generate leads so we can get to appointments. We have one concern and one concern only. It's the quantity. It's the quantity of our leads. And why isn't it the quality? Why isn't it quality of leads? Here's why. Because the quality shows up in the quantity. Right? The quality shows up in the quantity. One of my favorite quotes in the book is fortunately on the page that I get to discuss, page 135 of MREA. Yep, quality comes in the quantity. Page 135 of MREA, one of my favorite quotes. If you've seen me, if you've been through Model Your Way to a Million, our MAPS Fast Track course, which is the deep dive into MREA, or you've seen me on stage, I will say this and say it again and again and again. Gary says the octane of your fuel is irrelevant if you don't have enough to get to your destination. The octane of your fuel is irrelevant if you don't have enough to get to your destination. And that is all I think about when I think about my lead generation model. When I think about leads, I think, how much do I have, right? If you are sitting on the side of the road without gas because you ran out and cars are zooming by you, right, and looking at you like an idiot, right? And I've run out of gas, so I can say that. I've only done it once. It only took once. And it was in New York in a truck. But if you're sitting on the side of the road and you run out of gas, you are not thinking to yourself, you know, when I was at that gas station, I was going to put 89 grade in, but I chose 86 because it was a little cheaper and I should have went with 89 grade. No, you are not. You are thinking, how the heck do I not have 1 more gallon? How the heck do I not have enough fuel to get to my destination? It is the same in lead generation. In lead gen, the quality is in the quantity. So stop thinking about, well, it's all about the quality of my leads. It's all about the quality of my database. Gary says for effective lead generation, we have to be systematic. We have to be frequent. We have to be consistent, because it's with frequency and consistency that we gain mind share. Right? There is a stronger correlation between the number of leads generated in a business and the consistency and frequency of your message. There is no correlation with time in the business. There is no correlation with experience in the business. It is 100% correlated. The number of leads is correlated with the frequency and consistency of your message. The frequency and the consistency of your message. So, what are the 3 key areas of the lead generation model? MREA, page 136. Number 1, prospecting and marketing. Page 136, prospecting and marketing. The goal is mind share, right? So we need to prospect and we need to market to move the general public into a target haven't met, right? These are people that I haven't met but I want to meet. Into a met, okay, now I've met them, right? Now I've met them. Into an allied resource. Into an allied resource. The goal is to prospect and to market to these groups in such a way that as many as possible over time puts you in the number 1, 2, hardly 3, number 1 or number 2 real estate mindshare position. So that's why I'm okay. They have another agent. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being number 2 if I'm not number 1. And remember, in this concept of prospecting and marketing, according to page 136, prospecting is you finding them. Marketing is you attracted them and they find you. Which one is shift proof? We've seen a lot of marketing in the last 3, 4, 5, 7 years. But which one is shift proof? Prospecting. Prospecting is. So on page 138, one of my favorite pages of MREA as well, there's prospecting-based lead generation and there's marketing-based lead generation. You need to choose one. You need to then choose a second, and then you need to choose a third. Why? Because top agents typically have 3 legs to their stool. But this is a great starting point. This page, 138, is a starting point on what top agents do to generate leads. Now, in our organization, we call them lead generation levers. In fact, you've heard that, right? You've heard that coined phrase being used more and more and more. What is your lever? And why? Because I look at it much like a lever, right? I look at it much like a lever, and I know that if my agents are jumping on this lever, right, and they're jumping here and they're jumping here, what's going to happen on the lever? The other side's going to go up. I know if I do this lead generation activity, it is a lead generation lever, and the results will show up. If done right, if done with skill, if done consistently, and done frequently. That's all I care about. Prospecting and marketing around an activity consistently and frequently. The second thing we need to do, right, second law, or the key area of the lead generation model, is setting up your database and feeding it constantly. Setting up your database and feeding it constantly. Page 142 of MREA. Now, this is probably one of the most important pages in the book. It may not be my favorite, but it is one of the most important. And here's why. Because Gary said on this page that your database is your business, right? Your database is your business. Building up the number of names in your database and the relationship with the names is what the core of building a business is all about. So that's where I love it. And that's where it's so important, because it's not just quantity, right? We said the most important thing is quantity. But what did Gary say on page 142? Building up the number of names, or the quantity of names in your database, and the relationship with those names in your database is what building a real estate business is all about. There is value in the relationship. So here's our problem. There's a lot of us that go out and we know lead gen. Let's go lead gen. Let's go lead gen. In fact, our organization, our company has done such a phenomenal job for the last 10 years since MREA came out, talking about lead generation, lead gen. Hey, did you do your lead gen? Well, first it was 1 hour, then it was 2 hours, then it was 3 hours, next it'll be 6. But we've talked about lead generation. But what's the difference between lead generation and a lead generation model? It's only a model if it's systematic. It's only a model if it's automatic. It's only a model if it's duplicatable. And the problem is we may do all the activity, but we don't have the database, we don't have the system to plug that activity into. We're not taking these names, putting them into a system such that then we're gaining mind share for that buyer or that seller. Because the third part of the lead generation model is systematic marketing to your database. See, sometimes we think marketing and we think, oh, it's like print ads and billboards and radio and TV, and we go to Mega Camp, which we should go, and we see all these things that people are doing, and they're exciting and they're fun, they seem creative. That's not marketing. I mean, it is, but not MREA marketing. When Gary said marketing, it was systematic marketing to your database. You do an activity, you find an immediate buyer, immediate seller, future buyer, future seller, and then you put them into a database that you built already, and you feed it constantly with new names, and then you systematically market to that database. Page 145. Guys, that is what moving from E to P means in lead generation. And our problem in this industry is we talk about lead generation, but we don't talk about the lead generation model. Right? If we don't have a system such that once we meet someone, they will be systematically connected with in a systematic, meaningful, and functional way, then we don't have a model. And this section of MREA, right, talks about what is a habit met and what's a met. And as we get into future weeks together, we're going to go through the lead generation model in more detail, and what is an 8x8 campaign, and what is a 12 direct campaign, and what is a 33 touch campaign. And if you don't know those now, well, you do because you read these pages, and we'll discuss them later. in our mastermind together. Specifically, how do we connect with someone 12 times a year so that we move them from we haven't met them to now we've met them. And then we're going to connect with them 8 times in 8 weeks to build a relationship. And I'll tell you, that's probably the least implemented one in our organization or our industry. And then once we've earned the right to put them in a 33 touch, we do that. See what happens oftentimes? We meet them, 33 touch. Met them, 33 touch. And the middle portion, the building relationship, that 8 touches in 8 weeks, or 8 touches in 7 weeks, or 6 touches in 6 weeks. I don't care, but that relationship building campaign, that relationship building process gets forgotten. Gets forgotten. So we're going to talk about haven't mets. We're going to talk about mets. We're going to talk about allied resources in the future. But on page 142 of MREA, Gary says this. Gary says, if you grasp the simplicity of this concept, then you understood one of the most important concepts of the whole book, albeit a simple one, that your database is your business. Your database is your business. Building up the number of names in it and the relationship with those names is really at the very core of what building a real estate business is all about. The size of your real estate business will be in direct proportion to the size and the quality of your database. And I got back, man, it was last Friday, I spent the day in Austin with about 10, 15 of Gary's expansionists, personally coached by Gary. And guess what we talked so much about? Database. It's the same. It's the same for an expansion business, right? We're in 23 cities, I think 10 different states now, right? We still talk about database. We still talk about building the size of your database. Why? Because as we build the size of our partner's database, their business grows. As their business grows, our business grows. There's no difference. Page 142 will forever live. It'll be an MREA too as well, I assure you. So our economic model told us we need appointments, right? We took those appointments and said, heck, how am I going to get those appointments? Well, we're going to choose an activity from a page 138 of MREA, and we're going to nail that activity. We're going to do it consistently. We're going to jump on that lever. We're going to jump on it every day, and we're going to add people to our database. We're going to systematically market to those people. When we do, we're going to do deals. We are going to sell a lot of real estate. What happens when we sell real estate? What do we get? What do we receive? What's our gift? Commission check, right? If we do a good job, we will get a commission check. And many of us get many of those. And so the commission check goes in and the business, right? Or the money goes into an account and we just keep on running. And we think, man, that was awesome. I want to do that again. And we do it again and again and again. And so we're generating money, but we've never built a budget model. We've never built a budget model. In fact, Gary says on page 152 of MREA, so if you have your books, turn to page 152, that most agents just can't get their heads around the fact that a budget is a powerful financial planning tool. A budget is a powerful financial planning tool. Now, how many of you that are watching live have a P&L? If no one says yes, we're going to be in trouble. I'm going to wait for a second. Who has a P&L? You know, when I first built my P&L, I thought, okay, great, budget model, I have to build a P&L. I have to build a P&L. So I built one. And a P&L is what? Profit and loss. Shows, right, you know, the profit. Shows me, hopefully, not a loss, but it shows me, right, money in, money out. Shows me what I'm left with at the end of the day. Interestingly enough, I ran for the first few years on a P&L, which is not a budget. Which is not a budget. In MREA in this session, we're introduced. Awesome, Lucy said yes. Lucy Thompson has a P&L. I would say this, agents that have a P&L are light years ahead of agents that do not. And yet we need to take that P&L and then turn that P&L into a budget. And a budget answers a few questions. A budget first answers the question, what do we expect to invest? And I didn't say spend, but what do we expect to invest in our business? What did we invest in our business? And what's the difference? What's the variance? So there's an expectation, a budget, there's an actual and a variance. Budget, actual and variance. Write those words down if you're taking notes. Budget, actual, variance. Now, what does a P&L typically look like? Just shows us our GCI in, our expenses, our cost of sale, and GCI left, which is awesome. However, it doesn't ask the question, what did we expect to invest? What did we invest? And why is there a difference? And the reason why that's so important is oftentimes I was the guy that read the budget model, and the budget model, right? So this is going to be a broad stroke conversation about the budget model. The budget model says what? That a typical agent will spend, or a top agent, right? Let's not call them typical. Typical agent will spend about 30% on expenses, right? Running the business, and about 30% on cost of sale, right? People leverage in terms of licensed people. I read that the first time, right? And I was a real estate agent at a different company, and that was fine for me at the time, and that's cool too, because there's people from different companies in this group watching. But I read that, and I didn't have coaching around MREA, and thought I could beat that, right? Who's thought that before, right? MREA says I need to invest 30% into expense and 30% into cost of sale. That's 60%. I'm working off of a 40% profit margin. Not me. I bet you I could get it to 50, and I did. Bet you I could get it to 60, and I did. Bet you I could get it to 70, and I did. Bet you I could get it to 80, and I did. And guess what else I did? Nothing. Nothing but real estate, because my profit margin was 80%, but I had not invested in my business where the budget model told me I should have. And so I had turned this budget model, right? I turned a model into a menu. I turned that model and said, well, I love the economic model, love it. I'm going to work off of that. I'm going to know how many appointments I need, and I love the lead generation model. I'm going to build that. I'm going to focus on it. I'm going to capture that model. I'm going to follow it. And I got to the budget model, and I said, nope, I don't want a number 3. I'm not going to work off a 40% profit margin. And I started making business decisions around beating the model. Remember, MREA page 152. Most agents just can't get their head around the fact that a budget is a powerful financial planning tool. We have to change our mindset and stop thinking about stop looking at our budget on, well, I have to spend it. Like, what am I going to spend today? How much did I spend? And start changing that word spend to invest. And why? Who invests money? Anyone invest in Apple 20 years ago? Why would you invest in stock? Why would you invest in a company? If I invest $5, do I want 5 back? No, keep the 5, right? Keep the 5. When we invest, we expect some multiple, some return back, right? If I'm going to invest 1, rule of thumb is, right? Yeah, I like Sarah. Nope, we want more than 5. Right? If I'm going to invest 1, I want a multiple. Typically, ROI, people will look for 4 to 1, right? 4 to 1, 5 to 1. Sarah, I love that you want 10 to 1. The thing is we have to have some multiple back, and that's what the budget model does. It allows us, if tracked properly, what did we expect to invest? Why? Did we invest it? Why or why not? What was our variance, and what was the outcome? And what I learned from the budget model, from experience, was as I started trying to beat the budget, as I started trying to, the budget model says I can spend about 10% on lead generation. I'm going to spend 7. Guess what happened? Not enough leads happened, right? If I'm spending 7%, you see what I just caught myself. If I'm investing 7%, not spending, I was spending 7, I wasn't investing it. And that's why if I look at the budget and we say, hey, what can we invest? Then the budget becomes a powerful financial planning tool. For every dollar invested, we need to receive some multiple of that dollar back. Dollar for dollar doesn't work in our budget model. You might as well keep it and save yourself some time. Now, why don't we invest money? Why don't we? Think about what you hear around your office. Should I, like someone calls you, says, hey, I got this great deal for just 1 transaction, right? For just the cost of 1 transaction, you can have this zip code for a year. If we're nervous about spending money, it means we have not gained enough confidence around our budget model, and that's because we don't have one. If we don't know if we should invest, if we don't know if we should put that money towards something, it's because we don't have a budget model telling us that we should. Go to page 157 of MREA. I love this page. I live on this page. I answer so many questions about my business from this page. And what I love about this page is I don't care, it doesn't matter if you're a $1 million agent today, if you sold 40 million in real estate last year, 20 million in real estate, 15 million in real estate, 10 million in real estate, 5 million in real estate, or on your way. What this chart does on page 157 of MREA is tell you, hey, if you're a $5 million agent, what should your cost of sale be? What should your salaries be? What should your lead generation be? What should you put towards occupancy and technology and your phone and your supplies and your education and equipment and auto? What should you be investing? And when I gave myself up to the budget model, if I can say it that way, when I committed to that budget model and I moved from making it a menu to a model, all of a sudden my business started to grow. Now it took faith, absolutely. I had to believe that yes, I should invest 11%, 12%, at a certain point in time in my business, 13% of my GCI towards salaries. But here's what happened when I did. My entire organization knew that we were committed to this budget model. My entire organization knows that we follow the model. So I don't make all the decisions. The organization makes the decisions. MREA makes the decisions. I'm a good guy and bad guy sometimes based on the model. So for instance, I remember back as we were growing and we were looking at that budget model and everybody was working incredibly hard. And right, this is live. It's being recorded. I'm going to tell you the truth. Everybody was working really hard and we just weren't hitting our goals. Right? We just weren't hitting our goals. I have to look at that and say, okay, well, we're not hitting our goals. And sure enough, we looked at our budget and our salaries were at about 7% of GCI. So it could be argued one of two things needs to happen. Either people are underpaid, right? Because MREA says, Chris, as the owner, you should be willing to invest at that point in time 12%. So we had 3, 4, 5% of GCI that should either be paying people more, investing in salaries, or hiring someone more. And all of a sudden, the budget dictated that we had money in our budget to go out and get a listing manager. That listing manager position or role was not filled. So the budget model pushed us and drove us into which model? The fourth model, the organizational model. And that's why these models, right, the economic model pushed you into a lead generation model. You had to have a lead generation model. The lead generation model forced you into a budget model. You had to have a budget model because once you start generating money and cashing checks, if you don't have a budget, it's going to get messy. So the 3 key areas of the budget model, according to MREA, number 1, page 154, lead with revenue. Lead with revenue. Only spend money that your business has generated. I love this industry, right? I started this industry broke. I mean, truly, right? I moved across the country. Many people know, right? I lived in New York. I moved across the country. I had about, I think at the time I finally got to the West Coast, I got to Oregon, I had about $800. That's not gonna fund my life for very long, right? I found an apartment for $350. It was a studio. I got a roommate. That was awkward. I got a job, right, bussing tables and being a bartender while I jumped into real estate. The beauty of it is that's where many people know me as the open house guy. I started building my business on one lead generation model, right? One activity, page 137 and 138 of MREA, open houses. And then lead with revenue says spend money when your business is generated. Earn the right to spend and invest money. Real estate can succeed with very little startup costs to generate revenue. Do not do a build it and they will come. Do not do that. Lead with revenue. First key area of your budget model. Second key area, page 155, play red light, green light. See, you can't do that unless you execute on the 8 goal categories of MREA. When you look at your leads and where did it come and what turned out from those leads, right? Where did you invest? So you can't red light, green light if you don't have a budget model. Page 155 of MREA. Gary also says in this section, and it was probably in a mastermind with us that he said that. He said, don't be as concerned with how much money you're spending as you are with the results you're getting by spending it. And that's the beauty of page 157, because no matter where I am in my volume, right? I'm a $10 million agent, let's say, and I don't know, like, Who should I hire? When should I hire them? Well, the model tells me that I should invest 12% of my GCI towards salaries, which is $36,000. So if I'm producing around 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 million, and I don't have a $36,000 line item in my budget for salaries, then I'm going to be under leveraged. The budget model bosses me around. The budget model tells me what to do. The budget model tells me where to invest. Spending isn't the problem. The problem is holding that spending accountable for results. Remember, 4 to 1, 5 to 1, 10 to 1, choose your ROI. The third key area of your budget model, page 156, sticking to it. Stick to the budget. Be willing to stick to it. Remember, my team holds me accountable both ways. See, that's a beautiful accountability world, right? So we're at, and they can see that budget. We're an open book company. They see that our salaries are at 9%. They can either say, hey, let's hire someone so we're not working as hard, or let's give out bonuses. Let's increase salary. Why? Because I'm willing to put 10, 11% towards salaries. The budget tells me to. And I know that I either have to find talent to fill that or reward people because they're driving production. It also goes the other way. What happens if I'm at 13%? Or if I'm at 15% salaries, right? 15% of my GCI or 14% of my GCI is going towards salaries, I'm going to have a very real conversation with my operations team and say, hey, listen, like either we're doing salary cuts or we as an operations team need to drive production. We need to serve our agents. We need to provide better systems such that those agents are out in the field producing, because when they produce, GCI comes in and that solves our problem too. See, if you are talent and you believe you're the right person to be as part of our team, then guess what? That budget model answers the question, doesn't it? Because talent will make sure production shows up from the agents to make sure we don't go over budget in salaries. Is that not incredible? I love the budget model. It's why. It is the puppet. You're up here with your budget model, and your budget model is telling you what decisions to make. Do you have talent? Maybe, maybe not. Do you have talent? Maybe, maybe not. It tells you where to invest. The second thing to think about is cost of sale and expense. And you'll dive deeper into that when you get to the budget model in depth in this mastermind. But cost of sale reflects the actual cost of capturing, by definition, converting your leads to sales through licensed individuals. Expense, salaries are part of expense, right? That's the cost of doing business, right? That's your admin, and that's your marketing and your lead generation, your occupancy and your rent and your car and your coaching. What's interesting about page 157 is salaries comes before cost of sale, right? We often say, well, should I hire that administrative person or that buyer's agent first? And that answer has been our company knows that answer. What's interesting, page 157, your budget would tell you how to build your operation or organizational model well before you ever had to answer that question. So let's go to the fourth model, right? Your budget will dictate your organizational model. In fact, as people got very, very keen on pay-per-click, right? And we still, right? Pay-per-click, like we buy leads. I always have this philosophy that I'm going to pay for people, not pay-per-click. I'm going to pay for people. Why? Because it's the organizational model that will drive incredible growth. There are more pages in MREA attributed to the organizational model than any other model. Do you think that's a chance? Or do you think that's important? So let's go through the main areas of your organization model. On page 160, it starts. Page 160, hire administrative support. Don't hire sales support, hire administrative support. And on page 160, here's the key. Hire someone with the skills to document and later implement your systems. Now, what does our first hire typically do? Even if you did administratively hire or operationally hire, what do we tell them to do, ask them to do, or force them to do? Like, we are just so stressed. We're doing so much that we just throw stuff at them, right? We're doing deals and we hand them off transactions. We're doing deals and now they're a listing manager. We're doing deals and now they're a marketing manager. Hire someone with the skills to document first and then implement. They shouldn't be implementers. If the first thing we're doing is giving them files to deal with, then they're implementers, which means we probably hire too late. Hire someone with the skills first to document what you've been doing, to follow you around and say, hey, what am I successful at? What am I doing? Because if you're at the point of hiring, then you are successful, right? Your production is there. You've begun to produce. That's the easy part of real estate. Now we have to document why we're successful. Document what you do differently. Document what your unique value proposition is. But what's interesting, on page 159, Gary says designing and implementing systems takes more time than you think and takes very specific skills. Are you frustrated right now with your operational world? If so, that's probably because you're doing it. And designing and implementing systems takes more time than you think and are very specific skills. Direct quote, page 159. So if you're stuck doing it, understand you may not have the skills or you may not have the time. So hire someone to document and later implement systems. And right after that, Gary said, it's because of that. For most, this systems implementation leads to frustration, which leads to poor systems or no systems at all. Welcome to the world of real estate. Welcome to what stands between the sort of the switch between us going from a real estate agent into a business owner. So our first hire, the first step of the organizational model, page 160, is a person that will document and later implement. There are three types of leverage. I say leverage and we think people. However, leverage answers three important questions. And this is what's really cool, right? Leverage or operations answers three important questions. First is systems. How are we going to do this? Second, it's tools. What are we going to do it with? And third, it's people. Who will do it? How, what, and who. How, what, and who. Maybe you're awesome at how and what. Great, build systems for it, then get the who. Maybe you're not great at how and what. Then hire someone to build those systems and tools before you start building this huge organization of salespeople that are going to wonder why they're with you when you don't have systems and tools for them to plug into. So the organizational model is key. The budget model told us administrative help comes first. Expense shows up before cost of sale. Page 169 of MREA says, when you hire the right person, they'll develop and implement your systems and tools. And here's what's awesome. Page 169, if you didn't read this page, please go back and read it. It's a page that I missed many, many times in the book, and it probably wasn't until maybe the 11th, 12th time that I read through that book that I thought, my goodness, I know what I'm missing. Gary says there are 2 Ds in our business, 2 Ds. Now, most of the people on this call are one of them, right? We are the leadership D of our organization. We're going to drive to get stuff done. We are just out there knocking stuff out, putting deals together, driving our business forward. The problem is our business needs a second D. You brought leadership D, but we also need business D. Business D. And business D, Gary says on page 169, 170, and 171, business D is what is about the drive created by infrastructure. Having both is the key to building a truly great business. And what Gary says is oftentimes they live in inverse proportion to each other. If you're phenomenal at leadership D, you're probably not phenomenal at business D. If you're phenomenal at business D, you may not be phenomenal at leadership D. However, business D actually will look like leadership D because business D allows the business to move forward and continue whether the leader's in town or not. And the greatest thing that I could have ever done, my coach one day said, get out, right? Get out of the business for a period of time. That was the first time I went away. Right? Zero phone, zero internet. I was in Costa Rica for a month, and many of you know that led to other phenomenal opportunities with launching KW Costa Rica for me and some partners. But I went to Costa Rica, and interestingly enough, it was the first time I left, and my business did better without me. Now, did things break? Yes. Did things need to get fixed? Yes. I had someone that quit and hired themselves back while I was gone. That happened. That was awesome. But interestingly enough, so leadership D wasn't in the room, but business D was. The business kept going. It didn't need me. When I came back to provide leadership D, great. We righted the ship, right? We were right there on track. Before, it would have never happened. So I am a firm believer that the real estate business is won and lost with business D. I like to say I love to collect business D talent. I am so attracted to business D, not in a weird way, but I'm incredibly attracted to just business D talent. And if I can find a place in my world, I don't like to let them go. because I know that they will drive business whether I'm there or not. Leadership D and business D, it's what it's all about. The second key thing is hiring talent. Man, go to page 161 and reread what talent is, right? Talent pushes to get answers. Talent shares our goals and fulfills their needs as a byproduct of their own. Talent knows what it wants or is actively searching. Talent pushes you constantly, so be ready. If you don't like to be pushed, then you don't want talent. If you don't like to be pushed, if you don't want people calling you and texting you and say, hey, why are you doing it this way? Or, hey, why don't we do this? Or, hey, can we do that? Talent pushes you constantly. I will tell you, my director of operations pushes me almost daily. My director of expansion, Katie Benson, pushes me daily. Sarah's my director of ops. Sarah McAdams pushes me daily. My director of sales, John Powers, pushes me daily. Why do I love that? Do I like to be pushed? Ask them. Probably not. However, I know their talent. Because they do. Talent continues raising the bar and wants to be associated with talent, and you know you have talent because their language is language of challenge and achievement. Page 161 of MREA, get good with that page. The last thing we'll cover today, one of my favorite pages of MREA, I don't need to turn there. It's page 167. This is the consultative interview. Your world is phenomenal if you know page 167. Anybody in my organization knows page 167 because Gary says you need to ask 4 questions and 4 questions only every single week for everybody in your world. This is your organizational model. This, right? There's a science and an art. This is the science of your organizational model. You ask the person, right? Everybody every day. If you're your own person, ask myself this. 1, what was my goal? 2, how did I do? 3, how do I feel about that? 4, based on how I did, what is my goal now and what do I need to do? Think about those 4 questions. What was my goal? I verbalize it. How did I do? I verbalize it. How do I feel? If I hear, well, I feel pretty good, like given the situation, all of a sudden I'm thinking, whoa, if I always have an excuse, I'm going to know that every single week. If I have someone in my life that always has an excuse, I'm going to know that because I have this conversation. 4, hey, based on how you did, what do you need to do now? Like, we're going to recast what we're going to do next week. 2 other questions on page 167. Is there anything that's going to keep you from doing that? Right? Is there anything that will prevent you from hitting that this week? No, Chris, nothing. Awesome. 1 more question that I need to own. Is there any support or training that you need to accomplish that? Well, yes, I need some training here. Awesome. Let's get that done. Those 4 questions, that model on page 167 is the basis for training and consulting in MREA on page 164 through 167 of MREA. Guys, those are your 4 models. Economic model forces you to build a lead generation model because you need leads to get those appointments. Once you start getting appointments and going through, right, your business plan of converting, you're going to get some money. You're going to generate some income. And once you generate income, you need a budget. You're going to follow that budget model. That budget model is going to drive growth. That budget model is going to drive consistency in your business, which is going to lead to more business, which is going to lead to an organizational model. And you're going to be forced, right, propelled into an organizational model. All right, guys, that's page 128 to 172, 4 models in 1 hour. Questions, thoughts, feedback, anything that you need. I know a lot of people, right, middle of the day on a Thursday, it's tough for you to be on. A lot of people will watch the video of this. If you watch the video, I will monitor this feed. If you watch that video and you want the economic model spreadsheet, right, or if you watch the video and have any questions, just log on, ask some questions around any one of those 4 models. Ben knows, and Ben has actually been through Model Your Way to $1 Million. It's the MAPS Fast Track course. It launches again, I think, next month. Just go to mapscoaching.com or modelyourway.com, and you can sign up for a 10-week deep dive into MREA as well. I'm going to be hopping on. I am on these live sessions. I'm learning so much from all of you as well. It's phenomenal that Ben and his organization, United Home Group, has put this together. So please plug in, interact, collaborate together around MREA, and I'm here if you need me. Thanks, guys.